The resignation letter was still in her jacket pocket when the call came in. Lena Parfitt had written it 3 times. The first draft was 2 pages long and said everything she'd been holding for 18 months, the falsified supply logs, the patients discharged before they were ready, the way Administrator Holt smiled at board meetings while the ICU ran short on saline. She burned that one. The second draft was half a page and still too honest. The third was 4 sentences, professional, clean, the kind of letter that would get filed and forgotten, which was exactly what she wanted. She'd handed it to the department secretary at 7:45 that morning, cleared her locker by 8, and was sitting in her car in the Rideau Valley Health Center parking lot by 8:12, engine running, hands in her lap, not sure where she was going. That was when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Ottawa area code, but not a contact she had saved. She almost didn't answer. She was 32 years old, she had 11 years of nursing behind her, she had $640 in her checking account, and she had just walked away from the only career she had ever wanted. She did not feel like talking to anyone. She answered anyway. "Is this Lena Parfitt?" A man's voice. Low, careful, the kind of voice that had learned to sound calm in rooms where calm was hard to find. "It is. My name is Sergeant Major Trask. I'm with JTF2. We have a situation, and we need your help." She sat there for a moment with the phone pressed to her ear and the engine still running and the snow coming down soft and steady on the windshield. "How did you get this number?" she asked. "From your service file," he said. "You're the Lena Parfitt who volunteered with the Canadian Forces Health Services Group in 2019. Kandahar Follow-Up Support, CFB Petawawa." She was. "We know what happened this morning," he said. "We're sorry to reach out at a time like this. But we have a man who's running out of time, and we've been told you're the right person for this." She looked at the letter in her jacket pocket. She looked at the snow. She thought about the 18 months she had spent watching a system she loved slowly hollow itself out from the inside, and she thought about the moment she had decided she couldn't be part of it anymore. "Tell me the situation," she said. The drive took 40 minutes. Sergeant Major Trask had given her an address in the Gatineau Hills, not a base, not a hospital, a private property that she later learned belonged to a retired colonel whose name she was never officially told. When she pulled up the long gravel driveway, there were 2 unmarked vehicles and a man standing in the cold without a coat on, which told her everything about how long he'd been waiting. His name was Corporal Yves Sauvé, and he was 26 years old, and he had a femoral laceration that someone had packed with a trauma dressing that was now completely saturated. He was conscious but gray, his lips the color of old putty, and when she knelt beside him in the back of the vehicle and pulled back the dressing to assess, she heard the man beside her pull in a breath. "How long ago?" she asked. "Hour and 40, Trask said. She didn't say what she was thinking, which was that an hour and 40 minutes with that kind of blood loss meant they were already behind. She said, "What do you have? Walk me through your kit." They had more than she expected. Someone had planned for this, or planned for something like it. She worked quickly and without speaking except to ask for what she needed, and the men around her moved without hesitation, passing instruments and supplies with the precision of people who had learned to function in tight quarters under pressure. She had worked with military personnel before. She knew that particular kind of focused silence. It felt in a strange way like coming home. Sauvé's pressure was holding by the time she got the bleeding under control. Not good, but holding. She looked up and found Trask watching her with an expression she couldn't immediately read. "He needs a hospital," she said. "Right now. He needs a vascular surgeon, and he needs blood products, and he needs an oar." "We know," Trask said. "We've been making arrangements. We needed someone to keep him stable long enough to get there. Then let's move." She was already reaching for her jacket. "I'll ride with him." Trask put a hand up, not stopping her, just pausing her. "There's something else," he said. "Something we need to talk to you about. Not here, once he's in care." She looked at him. She had been a nurse for 11 years, and she had learned to read faces the way you learn to read monitors. Monitors, not the numbers themselves, but what the numbers were telling you underneath. Trask's face was telling her that whatever he needed to talk about was the real reason she was here. "All right," she said. "Let's get him stable first." The CHIO trauma team met them at the bay door. Lena stepped back the moment the professionals took over, which was the right thing to do and also the hardest thing, because stepping back was something she had always been bad at. She stood in the corridor with her hands clean and her coat still on and watched through the window while the team worked, and she did not let herself think about the letter in her pocket, or about Administrator Holt, or about the supply logs. Trask appeared beside her with 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed her one without asking if she wanted it. "You haven't asked me what we need from you," he said. "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." He nodded. They stood there for a moment, watching through the glass. Then he said, "How much do you know about what's been happening at Rideau Valley?" She turned to look at him. I know what I've seen, she said carefully, which is why I handed in my resignation this morning. You documented what you saw. It wasn't a question. She had in fact documented everything. Carefully and methodically over 18 months in a private file she kept on a personal drive that was not connected to any hospital server. Patient discharge records with dates and readmission rates. Supply requisition orders alongside inventory logs that didn't match. Notes from conversations she had with colleagues. Not recordings, just notes, written down the same day while the details were still clear. She had done it the way you do something when you believe nothing will ever come of it, but you need to do it anyway, because not doing it feels like a different kind of wrong. I documented what I saw, she confirmed. Trask reached into his jacket and set a photograph on the empty chair beside him. It was taken from a distance, slightly grainy, but clear enough. It showed a man she recognized, Director of Regional Health Operations Bernard Holt, shaking hands with another man in the parking garage beneath the Federal Health Building on Spark Street. The other man she did not recognize. His name is Lachlan Price, Trask said. He runs a procurement company out of Vancouver. In the past 3 years, that company has received 11 federal contracts for medical supply distribution to regional health authorities in Ontario and Quebec. Every single one of those contracts was approved by the same office. Holt's office, she said. Holt's office. He picked the photograph back up. The supplies that were ordered were not the supplies that were delivered. In some cases, supplies were never delivered at all. The paperwork said otherwise. She thought about the saline shortages, the compression stockings that came in the wrong sizes, the IV tubing that was perpetually on back order. The way Holt had stood at the all-staff meeting in February and told them the supply chain disruptions were a national issue, completely out of the hospital's control, while she was holding an order form that showed 48 units of saline signed in as received when the floor had gotten 12. How long has this been going on, she asked. We believe at least 4 years, Trask said, possibly longer. He paused. The challenge is that the paper trail inside the hospital has been very carefully managed, files altered, records overwritten. We have the procurement side. We don't have the internal side. He looked at her. We think you might. She asked for 2 days to think about it. Trask said that was fair. She drove back to her apartment in Centretown and sat at her kitchen table and looked at her laptop and didn't open it for a long time. Her downstairs neighbor was playing something on piano, the same passage over and over, working through a difficult section until it came right. She listened to it and thought about Sauvé and his gray face, and the way his blood pressure had looked when she checked it the second time, already climbing back toward something livable. She thought about a woman named Carla, a patient she had looked after in February, 67 years old, recovering from hip replacement surgery, who had developed a post-operative infection that should have been caught sooner, except that the antibiotic protocol had been delayed because the pharmacy was short on the specific formulation, and the formulation was short because the delivery had come in incomplete, because somewhere between the requisition and the dock someone had been pocketing the difference. Carla had recovered. Not everyone did. She opened her laptop. The file was organized by date and category. Supply discrepancies, one folder, discharge anomalies, another. Staff correspondence, emails she had saved before they could be deleted, printed to PDF and stored offline. She had 37 documents. Some were 3 pages long, some were a single paragraph. Together, they told a story that she had never intended anyone to read, because she had never really believed anyone would ask. She called Trask at 9 the next morning. I have documentation, she said. I don't know if it's enough. Let me look at it, he said. Let us determine that. And then what happens? He was quiet for a moment, and then it goes to the right people. There's a federal investigation already open, has been for 8 months. What we've been missing is a direct link between the procurement irregularities and what was actually happening inside the facility. Internal documentation from a credible source contemporaneously recorded. Contemporaneously recorded, that was the phrase. That was what made the difference between a story someone was telling after the fact and evidence that could withstand scrutiny in front of a review board or a court. She had dated every entry. She had noted the time. She had been careful in exactly the way that careful people are careful when they are angry and have nowhere to put it. All right, she said. I'll share the file. What happened next took 3 weeks, which felt both very long and very short, depending on which part of it she was in. There were meetings. Not at hospitals or government buildings, but in unremarkable conference rooms in unremarkable office buildings, the kind of rooms that had a whiteboard and a water jug and no windows, and felt specifically designed to make you feel like you were nowhere in particular. She met with investigators from the RCMP's Federal Policing Division. She met with a lawyer named Sutherland from the Public Prosecution Service, who had a precise handshake and asked extremely specific questions about the timestamps on her documents. She met twice more with Trask, who said very little but listened in a way that made her feel like everything she said was being carefully weighed. She also met once with Corporal Sauvé. He was at the Petawawa base by then, recovered well enough to be mobile, still moving carefully but with color back in his face. He found her in the corridor outside the meeting room before the second session and said, "I heard it was you who kept me stable on the way in." His French-Canadian accent was soft, the vowels round. He looked younger than 26, except around the eyes. "You were in good hands," she said, because she never knew what to do when people thanked her. "The team there did the real work." "Still," he said, "thank you, Nurse Parfitt." She had not been called Nurse Parfitt in 3 weeks. She had been called Ms. Parfitt and Lena and the witness, and in one context that she tried not to dwell on, the complainant. Nurse Parfitt sounded like something she had almost forgotten she was. "Get some rest," she told him. "Doctor's orders, except I'm not a doctor, so just take it as advice." He smiled. It was a good smile. She went into the meeting room and sat down and was professional and precise and answered every question accurately, and she did not cry, which she considered a significant personal achievement. The review board convened in the 4th week. She was not present for it. She had been told she might be called, but she wasn't. In the end, her documentation and her formal statement were sufficient. She sat in her apartment and waited, and the piano downstairs played, and she went for a long walk along the Rideau Canal in the cold, and watched the snow fall on the ice, and thought about what it meant to do the right thing when you weren't sure it was going to change anything. The findings were released internally first. She got a call from Sutherland the same afternoon. "The board has confirmed systemic procurement fraud at 3 regional health facilities," he said, including Rideau Valley Health Center. "Director Holt has been suspended pending a full criminal investigation. Lachlan Price Company has had its federal contract suspended. The RCMP is moving forward with charges." She stood at her window and looked at the street. "Your documentation was central to the internal findings," Sutherland continued. "The board specifically noted the quality and consistency of the records." She didn't say anything for a moment. "What about the patients?" she finally asked. "The ones who were affected. Is there a process for them?" "That's part of what the investigation will address," he said. "It will take time. It always takes time," she said. "Yes," he said. He didn't dress it up. She appreciated that. She went back to nursing 6 weeks later. Not at Rideau Valley, she applied to the Ottawa Hospital Civic Campus, and the interview went well enough that they offered her a position before she'd gotten back to her car. She started on a Tuesday in February, which was not a poetic day to start anything, but was when the shift schedule had an opening, and so that was when she started. On her first day, she was assigned to the cardiac step-down unit, which she had never worked before. She spent the first 2 hours learning where things were, the supply room, the medication cart, the crash kit, the specific preferences of the charge nurse, a woman named Belanger, who had been working the unit for 19 years and communicated primarily through eyebrow movements. Lena had the impression that if she could decode Belanger, she would be all right. Around 11, she was rechecking vitals on a post-catheterization patient in room 4 when she heard raised voices in the corridor. She stepped out and found a young man, early 20s, frightened, English mixed with something she thought might be Cree, trying to explain something to an orderly who was telling him visiting hours didn't start until 2. The young man was pointing at the room behind him and saying that his grandmother had been asking for water and there was nobody, and she was confused and he didn't know what to do. Lena walked past the orderly and went into the room and introduced herself and checked on the woman inside, who was 81 and post-procedure, and mildly disoriented but not in distress, just thirsty and a little frightened and wanting a familiar face. Lena got her water and sat with her for 10 minutes and spoke quietly, and gradually the woman's hands on the blanket stilled and her breathing slowed. When she came back out, the young man was still in the corridor. "Is she okay?" he asked. "She's okay," Lena said. "She's resting. She'd like to see you when you can come in." He let out a breath that seemed to have been in there for a long time. She went back to her charting. Belanger, passing by the nursing station, raised one eyebrow. Lena was beginning to understand the system. She thought that one meant something close to, "You'll do." It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a clean slate. 3 facilities worth of patients had received substandard care for 4 years, and whatever the investigation recovered, it would not recover what those people had been through. Holt would have lawyers, and the process would be long, and there would be days when it felt like nothing had changed at all. But on that Tuesday morning in February, in a cardiac step-down unit, she was still learning. Lena Parfitt picked up her chart and moved on to the next room, and the one after that, and the one after that. That was the work. It had always been the work. She was still here to do it.